For the 24 years that he ruled Kenya, Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi inspired mixed passions. On one hand, he was loved.
Moi is a very kind person. Moi changed my life. Moi changed my life.
On the other hand, he was feared.
As long as at that time you are not singing Nyayo, even death was your right.
And even disliked.
I wished him out of power in the soonest possible time.
This man who steered what many describe as a tight ship, the most stable political years for Kenya, also led some of the most turbulent times for the country's human rights.
His portraits, I still have it. Nobody can joke with this.
From the tales of the men who worked closely with President Moi, to those who say they suffered under the Nyayo regime, this is the story of the colored legacy of Kenya's second president.
This was his last kuruka mwaka in Mombasa.
For some, like current Bahati MP Ngunjiri Kimani, the late retired president came as a blessing to their lives. Ngunjiri's first encounter with Daniel Arap Moi came at a moment of desperation as he struggled to resolve a land dispute.
I just waited, he has escort cars in front of him. Then when 1, 2 or 3 cars passed, then I just jumped on the road. I kneeled down, I took my hands up. Then his car came very close to me, it stopped. Then the security came. Of course, they had to call the ones who were in front, why they came, and he came out and told them, no. Shida gani kijana? Then I explained to him, you only can listen to a poor person. These people have money, they are snatching me this house, and I was ready to buy. We had agreed, ABCD. It's a big story. When he saw many people are coming, he told me to jump on the behind car to go in the State House. That was my first time to get in the State House.
That impromptu invitation into State House grew into a full-blown political relationship with the president. One that led Ngunjiri to become the chairperson of the all-powerful KANU branch in Nakuru town. But for Ngunjiri's fellow Nakuru resident, life faced the opposite direction.
So, here they are.
Koigi wa Wamwere, who had already been detained by Kenyatta's regime for 3 years for publishing articles critical of the government, soon became one of Moi's own political detainees. To fully understand Moi's relationship with human rights, one must look back at how his early years in politics shaped him. As chairperson of Kenya African Democratic Union KADU in the early 1960s, Moi is said to have been a key advocate for a strong opposition. He believed government ought to have been accountable to the people. But soon after, Moi began to dance a different tune. And the proverbial Pied Piper was the president, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. It began with Kenyatta wooing Moi to disband KADU and join KANU. KANU's only opposition at the time was successfully immobilized, and in return, Moi was appointed Home Affairs Minister in 1964. By 1967, the former teacher had earned his place as the country's second in command. When President Kenyatta died 14 years later in 1978, Moi's first move was to release 26 of Kenyatta's political detainees, including Martin Shikuku, writer Ngugi wa Thiong'o, and journalist Koigi wa Wamwere.
We hoped that he would bring new leadership because he had been a victim of tyranny himself, of bad politics.
But this anticipation was short-lived. Moi himself had set the tone for the years to come as he pledged to follow in Kenyatta's footsteps.
So I find painful to speak about Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, who has been my father, my teacher.
Even though Moi was fiercely loyal to Kenyatta, he was unaccepted by his predecessor's inner circle. The so-called Kiambu Mafia from Kenyatta's backyard alienated Moi and famously termed his presidency as a passing cloud.
Walikuwa nasema Moi ni kama mawingu hii inatembea. Itafika wakati yake na mawingu zinakwenda kanapotea. Nasema yeye ni kama mawingu yanapotea.
The small, tight-knit, influential circle of power brokers controlled politics in Kenya.
Wale walijaribu kina Ngaine, kina Njonjo, kina nani walijaribu kupindua yeye.
Navigating their influence was Moi's first challenge into the presidency.
To lead this country without Kikuyus, without Luos, you know Luos were not with him, Kikuyus were not with him, it's not easy. Those are the most vocal areas. So he must survive and make his own strategy.
And that meant surrounding himself with men and women who were irrefutably loyal to him and his party KANU. Any opposition that threatened his influence as president was quashed. By the early 1980s, a little-known underground group called Mwakenya Movement was emerging with anti-Mori rhetoric and seeking to overthrow his government. The state responded by launching massive police crackdown on any suspected members of the Mwakenya Movement. Koigi, who was at the time an elected member of parliament, had teamed up with radical and socialist politicians like James Orengo and Chelagai Mutai. Charles Njonjo called them the Seven Bearded Sisters.
There was one time that Njonjo had issued an order to the police to shoot to kill. We were opposed to such a things, fighting for an end to taxation of working couples. There were many issues that we were fighting against, and Moi didn't like what we were talking about at all.
In 1982, when Jaramogi Oginga Odinga and George Anyona tried to register a socialist opposition party, Moi responded by making Kenya a one-party state through the infamous constitutional amendment introducing Section 2A. He also reinstated the detention laws that had been suspended in 1978. The president could now suspend individual rights guaranteed by the Constitution. And this power would soon be tested on the 1st of August 1982, when the event that changed Kenya forever happened.
The government has been taken by a very powerful group, supported by the people, wananchi wenyewe na wanajeshi wote. Kwa hivyo, wherever you are, cooperate or you blame yourself. Thank you. Voice of Kenya.
One day, property worth 4 billion shillings was destroyed. Asian women were raped.
Hundreds of military officers and civilians were killed during the attempted coup. After the rogue military officers were neutralized, President Moi began a political detox. Dozens of opposition politicians were rounded up. Up to 900 people were jailed. Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, who was suspected of being involved in the coup attempt, was put under house arrest. His son, Raila Odinga, was detained alongside other opposition politicians. One of them was Koigi wa Wamwere.
And I had been brought when unconscious to Nyayo House. When I woke up, I found that I was naked and I was in a pool of water. Water came up to almost our knees, and it was bad water which was dirty. It was water where people defecated when you wanted to go for a long call. That's where you urinated when you wanted to go for a short call. That's where you slept. Remember, it would be, if you slept in the water, you might suffocate. So what we would do is just lean on the wall and support ourselves that way. And sometimes you would go to your knees because you got too tired standing.
You have read Shakespeare. What is the best time to kill a snake? In egg stage. If it hatches, it will give you problems. When you are plotting to overthrow a government, to kill a president, you should face the music.
He was not running my life the way my life should have been governed. He was not a humane person. Why should I wish that he is in power longer than he already was? Does that amount to wishing him, to overthrowing him? Of course not. To overthrow, you need an army, you need to organize yourself in a way that you are able to overthrow. But that I thought about Moi not being in power, yes, that was a dream.
As the years progressed, any person or group deemed suspicious by government was dealt with mercilessly. By 1988, the Constitution had been amended to empower the President to appoint or dismiss the Chief Justice, the Attorney General, the Controller of Budget, the Auditor General, judges of the High Court, and the Court of Appeal. There were no checks and balances for President Moi. The presidency had now become autocratic.
I'm a king pending inauguration.
Nakuru resident Harrison Githaiga believes he is anointed by God. He claims to be a king. His spiritual conviction was so strong during the Moi era that he decided to inform the president himself of this kingly status he believed he had.
In 1990, I went for my personally to make a declaration at the State House in Nakuru. I was misquoted and I was hurried to court with sedition.
For declaring himself as a king, Harrison says he was arrested and taken to a detention center.
I was taken to the Kangainya Kenya building, all the special branch offices, which were just about to eat me alive. It wasn't a simple joke. It was death and life. Most people have got their body injured to the extent they died out of the proceed. My best friend, Samuel Kenyajui, died as a result of torture. I was also to get finished in the hospital.
As whispers of these arrests, detentions, and torture chambers spread across the Kenyan population,
the president recognizes and encourages the informal sector known as Jua Kali.
In public, Moi portrayed a different persona. He was building gabions, burning illegal ivory, leading in Harambee sessions, attending church every single Sunday, and meeting world leaders like the Pope of the Catholic Church. On February 13, 1990, the Foreign Affairs Minister Robert Ouko was found murdered and his body mutilated. A commission of inquiry led by the then Chief Justice Evans Gisheru failed to complete its investigations. Ouko's murder became one of Kenya's longest mysteries. Even though it was acknowledged as a political assassination, the Moi regime distanced itself from any involvement in Ouko's murder.
At the time Dr. Ouko was being killed, I was in remand custody. At that very time, I started hearing some other people are being brought. They were being brought. The country was being swept. Every single thinking mind was under attack. Even here in Nakuru, even in Nairobi, everywhere in Kenya. The only problem Moi had is that he never wanted to see a thinking mind. He wanted to see anybody who is just ready to sing Nyayo, regardless of whatever it means.
A string of mysterious deaths and killings of Moi's fierce critics raised more eyebrows about Moi and his inner circle. Outspoken Anglican Bishop Alexander Muge died in a mysterious road accident. Father John Kaiser, who accused the Moi regime of fueling ethnic clashes in the Rift Valley, was shot dead.
When we talked about it, we are also getting threats. We were getting threats that you will follow him. You remember the issue of Kaiser, Father Kaiser. Again, when we questioned, you remember the first report was that he killed himself, then he drove to the ditch after killing himself. So some things you could see, they are not adding up. And when we challenged you get some private threats. That is for you, Jan.
Father Moses Muraya worked as Vicar General under Archbishop Ndingi Mwananzeki. During the early 1990s, Ndingi was a strong advocate against atrocities of ethnic clashes fueled by politics in the Rift Valley.
He could send us to go and see what is happening from the ground. And it was very traumatizing for us also, because we had never seen people dead by the roadside or people very badly wounded. So it was affecting us a lot.
At this time, the rallying calls to scrap Section 2A and introduce multipartyism were growing louder. Moi was under pressure from the international community to consider opening up the democratic space. Wilson Leitich had taken over the chairmanship of KANU Nakuru branch from Kimani Ngunjiri.
Mambo ya multiparty ingia, mimi nili challenge huko. Lakini mzee Moi akasema hapana, lazima hii kuja kwa sababu nimechoka. Nimejaribu kusuilia lakini sitaki kusuilia, wacha hii kitu ikuje. Amisi kutosheka. Nikakuja nikaweka mkutano Afraha Stadium. Watu najua hata Nakuru ni mchanganyiko maalum. Kabila yote 42 iko Nakuru. Mimi nikasema kuna kitu inakuja. Ukikuta Kikuyu anasema no Mary. Ukikuta Jaluo anasema Wanario. Hii kitu si mzuri. Wanario kwa Kijaluo nikosema sisi wawili. Kwa Kikuyu kusema no Mary nikosema sisi wawili.
In areas where KANU was extremely popular like the Rift Valley, KANU officials like Leitich strived to keep off opposition politics.
Nimetoa amri kwa youth. Nilikuwa na youth ile alikuwa anapata mshahara walikuwa 56. Nikasema sasa sababu natoka kila location, chunga location yako. Ukikuta hii mtu anatembea usiku kwa bar na kitole mbili, kata hiyo kitole moja ibaki ya umoja. Yaani kwa t-shirt tu. Basi hiyo kitu wacha, kumbe watu walikuwa wameungua ndani wakitaka hiyo kitu. Waje challenge katoka kwa watu. Sema hii mtu anasema kata kitole mbili, hata kusema hawako sema ati akatwe moja, alisema kata kitole mbili.
As the ethnic tensions grew, those who spoke to Moi about them say he was growing frustrated by how his team was handling the situation.
KANU was very, very strong, and you could use lies maybe to punish others. And maybe you try because they don't have access to the president. You have access and you tell the president something different. And maybe you think you are talking the truth.
This one we went and he listened and he said, I remember very clearly, he said, there are some people who are doing things behind my back and I am not happy. I don't like what they are doing, because even the so-called tribal clashes, I'm not happy with these killings.
Yeye alikuwa anasimama wima kwa roho yake. Hata ukisema saa ile iko na yeye maongea kidogo, wewe unasema na hii Kikuyu inasumbua sisi hapa. Wewe unaona uso yake anageuka mara moja. Unasema anasumbua kwa nini? Nyinyi ndio mnasumbua na chokoza Kikuyu.
This man, President Daniel Arap Moi, who had half the nation gripped in fear, was reconsidering some of his political decisions.
He was a student of Jomo Kenyatta. That do not carry the world with the leather straps, because when it goes down, it will go down with you. He told me, just carry the world with a very brittle banana fiber. So when the world is too heavy, it will go down on its own and leave you standing.
Hamjui kwamba ndani yenu wenyewe kuna Ford. Ambao wamevaa nguo ya mbwa wa mwitu. Kwa hivyo nimeona mimi kwamba dawa ni kutenga mbuzi na kondoo.
You see, that's how he was mad. He must come out himself with a solution. As a president, those are the controls he had.
Kitu mimi nauliza nyinyi leo, ili tuone hawa walio katika siasa, wale walio watumishi wa serikali, sisi tuseme kwamba tufungue, tuondoe ile section ya katiba ya Kenya ya 2A.
And after that, he have said, we respect the party and him. We shall go now singing Section 2A. That's how he was, that he must be in charge.
After the 1991 KANU delegates meeting that repealed Section 2A and introduced multi-party politics, the decade that followed remained turbulent as Moi scrambled to retain his seat and keep KANU as the top political party. His 24-year rule came to an end in 2002 when the Rainbow Coalition, led by Mwai Kibaki, ousted him.
I don't put any bitterness in my sufferings, because as I understand, it is a way I had to undergo. Are you getting me? Jesus knew, Daniel knew, that on failing to worship their idols, you've got to be taken to the dens of lions, isn't it?
I think he was trying to survive. And I think by that time, they wanted to throw him out in a dubious way or overturning the government. What do you think if you are the president? You must have stood your ground.
It's also biblical. I like quoting in the Bible. Spare the rod, spoil the child. Because you see, get tired of double talk. They say Kenya at independence, Kenya and Singapore, they were at par. But then they don't tell you Singapore was built on dictatorship.
Person to person, President Moi was very good. Yeah, he could listen to somebody. Yeah, he could listen even to a group when we organize some meeting, and he listened. Now, after listening, what happens?
What does forgiving mean? That it's okay what he did to us? That if forgiveness is of that color, and then I can say I have not forgiven him. In the sense that I cannot wish away that what happened, that history cannot be wished away. And neither Moi nor ourselves have the power to erase it. It cannot be erased. It will always be with us. Am I bitter with him? Would I want to harm him if I got an opportunity? Absolutely not.
Mimi, kwa sababu mimi nasema greatness of a nation is not its size or population. It is greatness of the heart. Roho ikiwa sawa, hiyo nabeba wewe sawa. Kwa hivyo ni wajibu wetu kujua kwamba our greatness ni our unity, ni our heart ya kuangalia mambo. Kwa hivyo wale wametuletea sifa, na nataka nyinyi katika kila location kuhimiza mambo ya athletic kila mahali. Mweusi ulifikiri utamwangusha mzungu wa Uganda kwa ngumi, kupambana ngumi. Niliona mwenyewe kwa macho yangu mara kwa mara, siangalii television, lakini nikasema waje niangalie kupambana. Hapa saa mbili na wakati ule anapohesabiwa moja, yule mtu wangu wa Kenya anatayarisha. Sasa alipokuwa kitagea wewe kuja hapa